Hello everyone. People often tend to confuse between this term judicial activism, judicial review, judicial restraint and judicial overreach. So here is a video I hope will help you to understand and clarify the differences between this term and its meaning. What is judicial review? Judicial review is a process under which executive, legislative and administrative actions are reviewed by the judiciary. Judicial review is a power bestowed upon the judiciary by the Constitution, by virtue of which judiciary can examine legislative enactments and executive orders of the government, be it central or the state. So, as the name suggests, judicial review, it is a power given to the judiciary to review the action of the government, be it legislative or executive. This doctrine of judicial review traces its origin to the case of Marbury versus Madison, which is a US case. In India, it is not the precedent, but the Constitution itself has granted the power of judicial review. And this power of judicial review has been derived by judiciary under Article 13 of the Indian Constitution. So judicial review can be understood as a form of court proceedings where the legitimacy of administrative actions and statutes can be reviewed by the Supreme Court or the High Court. Here, it is making a very important point that the power of judicial review does not lie with all the courts, but only to the Supreme Court and the High Court. Both the Constitutional Court has this power. Here are certain points to understand judicial review. First, judicial review is a power of the courts to consider the constitutionality of acts of the various organs of the government. Secondly, the provision of judicial review prevents the misuse of power by the legislature and executive. Thirdly, judicial review puts checks upon law if it infringes upon the fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution. And fourthly, judicial review has been considered as a basic structure of the Constitution. Judicial review is so important that it has been declared as the basic structure of our Constitution. Hence, judicial review plays an important role as a protector when the executive, legislative or administrative action harms the constitutional values and denies the rights. Now, let us understand judicial activism. What judicial activism is and how does it differ from judicial review? Judicial activism means that court goes beyond the law so as to consider a broader societal implications. In other words, judicial activism refers to a scenario where a judge overlooks a legal precedent or past constitutional interpretation for protecting the individual rights and serving a broader social perspective. Judicial activism is seen as a success in India because of the efforts of Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer and Justice P.N. Bhagawati. Judicial activism earned a human face in India with liberalizing of access to justice and granting of relief to disadvantaged groups through public interest litigation. People often tend to confuse judicial activism and judicial restraint. So, how is judicial activism again different from judicial restraint? Judicial activism and judicial restraint are just the opposite concept. Judicial restraint puts an obligation on the judiciary to follow the Constitution very strictly and to adhere by the black and white letters of law. Whereas in judicial activism, judges can take up issue suo motu wherever they think the constitutional law are being violated. However, with judicial restraint, the same judiciary has to abide by the laws propagated by the legislation and executive orders. And now that we have understood the term judicial review, judicial activism and judicial restraint, let us look into the word judicial overreach. What do you mean by judicial overreach? To put in simple words, excessive interference of the judiciary in legislative and executive action is known as judicial overreach. There is a very thin line dividing judicial activism and judicial overreach. While Judicial activism implies the use of judicial power to enforce its decision for the greater good of the society. Judicial overreach is when judicial activism crosses its limit. Here are certain points to understand judicial overreach. First, judicial overreach is when judiciary crosses its own function and starts interfering with the proper functioning of legislative or executive. Secondly, judicial overreach is considered undesirable for the society. And thirdly, judicial overreach is against the principle of separation of power. Thank you everyone. With this video, I hope all the terms are clear to you now.